Okay, so again, I'm going to give my overall thoughts here in this first section. Then we're going to have a huge spoiler section that follows it where I go through all the episodes. I shot it over a few weeks, so that's why everything's going to look different. And then we're going to wrap things up after the next break, okay? Okay. So, this is going to be Season 1 of Loki. I hope that's not too much of a spoiler. They've announced Season 2 already. But yeah, Season 1 of Loki gets a B. I do think this really helped build it back up after a clunky beginning. In case anyone were wondering, the audio issues, they did start to correct themselves. I didn't have to turn the volume up quite as high, so I could at least hear it a lot better. But you're not going to hear that too much early on from the second episode review. But still, you're going. And like I said, the audio issues were corrected. I do think there's some great performances from, of course, Tom Hiddleston, Sophie DiMartino. Owen Wilson does a good job. I can't remember who plays guard B-17, but all that is really well done. I do think there's some good jobs. I think it's still kind of a real clunky premise given the whole time travel plot, and the ending does leave more questions, but hopefully those questions can get better answers. Still, I mean, also the villain reveal, which I won't get into in this part, but it is a little cliche, as everyone basically saw this one coming, or at least anyone who really knows the Marvel Universe did. So it did do a good job of building it up, I think, and it did lead to a decent reveal, and I do think the performance was good given the fact that that character in the comics is very confusing and has never really had a truly great story attached to him. So, yeah. Anyway, like I said, that's why I'm giving it a B. It's solid, enjoyable, and I am eager for more.
Spider-Man Homecoming.
Haha, you'll never catch me, Spider-Man. Don't be so sure. I just might. Nah, I got this. This isn't over, Spider-Man. Think again, Bird Brain.
The Spider-Man Homecoming Vulture Attack playset.
Alright, so again, there's going to be spoilers from here on out until we get to the finale part. So, okay? Alright. Anyway, the second episode of Loki is basically Loki's first day on the job. I don't know what exactly the cycle for the TVA is. It doesn't seem to imply that they sleep or anything, but they seem to live lives, so maybe they do. Anyway, he's given this little crash course from Miss Minute before he starts everything again, and he promises that he read everything, and it turns out the way Mobius is keeping Loki in line is by promising him an audience with the Timekeepers. Whether or not Mobius has that ability is unknown. But from there, they have to go to a Renaissance fair, which is where variant Loki, we'll call it, had their latest attack. And it turns out this Loki can possess people. In fact, possessed one of the TVA agents and dragged that agent off into a portal. Loki tries to point out that that the variant Loki is still there, but it doesn't quite turn out as it thought it would. I'm trying to phrase that the right way, but yeah. It's later implied that he's trying to throw them off the course as well, but whether or not that's actually the case, I'm not sure. But anyway, when they return, Mobius tasks Loki with trying to do some research on, because it's revealed that they've arrested there are a lot of variant Lokis because he's that chaotic an individual. And so you see like a bunch of the Lokis they've arrested, and there's a Loki that won the Tour de France, there's a Loki that was the Hulk, there was a Loki that was Captain America, there was a Loki that was Satan even, and you see some of that. And so Loki is doing some research on things, and he comes across this one bit about Asgard falling, and it's something dawns in his mind, the idea of hanging out in apocalyptic scenarios, because if someone's fated to die, then you can do whatever you can, just as long as that, nothing changes in terms of death total, basically. So to prove this, he takes Mobius to Pompeii just as Vesuvius is about to erupt, and he causes this big scene. He lets a herd of goats free. He basically screams like, "Hey, my name's Loki, and that mountain's going to blow its top really soon." And right as he does, it blows its top, everyone runs away, and everyone starts like kind of scurrying as it happens, and it's like, see, and Mobius looks down at his little timeline monitor and shows, nope, there's no variance here. And so from there, they're trying to do even more research, and Mobius hits on the candy they had received in the first episode when they were in France, the anachronistic candy that couldn't have been made, and they need to try to track down an apocalyptic scenario where this candy was readily available. And they track it down to a hurricane hitting the Gulf Coast in 2050. And, indeed, variant Loki is waiting for them. Our Loki is forced to be with this sergeant because they don't want any shenanigans. But as this is happening, variant Loki possesses the sergeant, and we finally get a meeting of sorts between the Lokis. And kind of from there, it's like the Loki doesn't want to be called Loki. Variant Loki doesn't want to be called Variant Loki or anything like that. At one point, he actually possesses. Loki possesses another worker and demands to be called Randy instead. But I'm going to call Variant Loki Randy from here on out. Randy basically says, I planted explosives all throughout the store, but our Loki says, well, I am actually undercover. I'm trying to overthrow the timekeepers. And Randy says, well, I'm not interested in the timekeepers, and proceeds to eject all of these explosives into the time stream where they go off, and it starts fracturing and falling apart, and that's how the episode ends. But just before that, the real variant Loki, Randy, whatever I'm calling it right now, steps forward and reveals that this is actually a female, which I'm guessing was probably tipped off at some point. It was meant to be this big reveal. I think everyone had pieced together that, the Loki they're chasing is a female. Female Loki. I guess I'll still go with Randy in this case. I think this did a better episode. I think this episode did a better job of setting things up, but things really did seem to happen. There's some good Loki Mobius moments. Like, you can see them sort of semi-bonding, though there's still quite a bit of distrust there. Mobius is to the point that he can tell when Loki's lying and pulling a trick. But Loki sort of is also using some nature-nurture arguments, too. He says, not everyone who's bad is necessarily born bad. Sometimes bad things happen to them. He even points out his own upbringing. He was, an orphan frost giant brought up by Odin, brought up outside of his own element. Odin killed his father and then adopted Loki. That doesn't sound odd or traumatizing to you, does it? So, there's a little bit of that. Unfortunately, I think the big drawback is that I'm still having these sound problems. I don't know what it is with the sound mixing on the show, but I cannot tell what on earth is being said half of the time. I'm just not. And, there's this thing, this agent C20. They find her, and she's sort of recovered from being possessed, but she's just kind of rambling to herself in a corner, and it's revealed that she gave up the information on the timekeepers to Randy. So, but it's so hard to tell what's happening because you just keep hearing everyone talking like this for some reason. And it's like, what is going on? And this is the only Disney Plus show this is happening to me on. So I don't think it's like my TV or anything. Every other app that I've watched something on sounds fine. Like, I have my TV set at level 15 or 16 or 17, and it sounds fine. But with Loki, I have to crank it up to almost level 40, and it's like that's almost half the. That's how weird the sound is. Like I said, hopefully this clears up. I don't know what is going on. And like I said, I don't think it's my TV because I watched it on this, and like I said, other Disney Plus videos sound okay. Other apps on my smart TV sound okay. So, it just doesn't seem to make much sense. Okay, so see you all in episode 3. Okay, so episode 3 of Loki is called Lamentus, and it kind of gives a little bit more backstory on the female Loki, who I was calling Randy at the end of the last episode, but in this episode makes it known that she wishes to be known as Sylvie. So, she's Sylvie now. Anyway, like I said, it's kind of a bit more explanation into her backstory and a little bit more revelations on a couple of things. Basically what happens is, as she drops her bombs into the time stream and begins blowing it apart, she makes it back to the TVA the TVA headquarters, and Loki is pursuing her, and the two have a fight before she can get into the main office to try to learn where the timekeepers are located. And from there, they get confronted by the main judge, whose name escapes me at this point. Heck, kind of a rough day, sorry. Anyway, they get into a fight, they open up a portal, and they wind up getting transported to the moon of Lamentus 1, which is about to have a planet crash into it and all the life on it destroyed. However, in the process, their little time pack that they use to travel through time and everything winds up losing all its energy. So they need to try to get to this power source where this rocket ship is going to be launched out so the surviving people can escape. It's kind of like a weird Snowpiercer type thing where there's a train that's supposed to lead to the rocket, and then only the wealthy people are getting on the rocket. And unfortunately, as they sneak on board, Loki gets a little too intoxicated, and they get found out. They get thrown from the train, and the time pack is smashed. So their only hope to maybe get out is they have to create another variant, which will bring the TVA to bring them back to the TVA headquarters, basically. And it's kind of from there we get a little bit more kind of backstory with her, with Sylvie at this point. We get a bit with Loki. I mean, she sort of asks if he's had like a great love or anything. She lets it known that unlike him, she knew she was adopted pretty much from the day she was picked up. And then from there, yeah, it's like she denies any like godhood. She considers herself like a magician and an enchantress. She can enchant people and sort of possess their minds and their bodies. And she lets slip that when she possessed the agent from last time, C20, we actually see a bit of this before. We see inside C20's mind, she and C20 are in this bar, they're sipping margaritas, they're having some fun, and she's trying to learn about the timekeepers, and every time C20 puts up some type of resistance, she changes the setting, the locale. So first it's like a beachside cabana, and then it's like a nightclub, and then it's like this and like this, just trying to get something to click with her. And what Sylvie, reveals to Loki is that all of the time variants, or the time variant agents, are in fact variants themselves. So yeah, that does seem to be leading into a possible revelation there, I think, because with them being variants themselves, it doesn't mean that this was basically like a recruiting path to get Loki to join them. I mean, I think we're kind of getting a little bit into that kind of conspiracy right now. Like maybe they even tried to recruit Sylvie at one point to join them, who knows. And so from there, like I said, and now they need to get to this rocket to create the variant, because this rocket is doomed to never make it. Everyone's supposed to die. So if they can get this rocket to blast off and people survive, that will create the variant for the TVA to come. And so they get to the main city. However, as this is happening, a big riot breaks out, because again, there are people who aren't getting allowed to be on the rocket, i.e. the poor. And Loki and Sylvie try to make it through and sneak on board again, because as this is happening, the planet is getting close enough now that everything's just the big crashing is about to happen. And so they start getting to it, and just as they're about to get to it, it gets struck by a giant rock and blows up. So now they are stuck on Lamentus 3, and we don't know how they're going to get out of this. And that's how the episode ends. So yeah, a decent little bit of world building, decent chemistry between Tom Hiddleston and I forget who plays Sylvie. It's Marina DePinto, I think. It begins with a D. Sorry about that. Hopefully I'll put it up right here. Like I said, good chemistry between them. Interesting little factoids about the TVA. So hopefully this means, again, maybe now it feels like stuff is really starting to happen right now. And hopefully we can get some more freewheeling stuff happening soon. Okay, episode 4 of Loki is the Nexus event. And this is definitely the It Hits the Fan episode of the show. So basically we get an origin for Sylvie. We see her being taken in. She's taken as a very young child, and it's sort of implied the reason she got arrested is because The Loki in her timeline is not supposed to be a woman, though this is kind of backtracked a little bit later. It's revealed that the agent who arrested her was Ravonna Renslayer, who is now the head of the TVA, and we kind of see her going on this whole path, and then we kind of jump back to Lamentis 1. That's the moon that's being destroyed that Loki and Sylvie are stranded on, and the two sort of bond and begin holding hands again as Sylvie sort of explains her story, and again stating that she believes that the reason she was pulled in is because she was assigned female at birth when she wasn't supposed to be. Which, like I said, I'm glad this gets backtracked. I will say, and then later, she actually does ask Ravonna Renslayer why she was brought in, but Ravonna basically says, to be honest, I can't remember, so I think it's left a little more vague than to a gender thing, which was probably better because that's opening up a can of worms. I don't know if that's really something you want to get into there. As this is happening, though, Mobius and B-15 are able to track down this kind of energy surge. It's called a Nexus event that the two Lokis are essentially giving off when they're holding hands, and the final meteors are falling. The falling planet chunks are falling on top of them, are about to fall on top of them, and they're able to open portals, but they immediately take the two Loki and Sylvie into custody. Mobius is interrogating Loki, kind of chewing him out because, hey, it's like, I trusted you, and you betrayed me and started working with the enemy. And Loki's trying to explain, no, you don't understand. I've learned, the things that we've learned, like, everyone here is a variant, and they don't have a past to they all have their own past to memories that got scrambled. And Ravonna tells Mobius before this that Agent C-20, that's the woman in the the agent who was sort of rambling when they found her during the hurricane, and she's her memory, that her mind got completely scrambled, but later she sort of lets on there might be a bit more to it than that, and that spurs Mobius to begin working on his own. And he sees a videotape of, well, not a videotape, but basically a recording of Agent C-20 getting killed because it revealed that she got all of her old memories back, and that she now knows she's a variant. As this is happening, Agent B-15, this is going to get confusing, B-15, who Sylvie temporarily possessed during the hurricane in episode 2, I believe. She's having she's getting her memories returned to her, and she actually goes to Sylvie, and Sylvie does return her memories, and the two begin working together. As Mobius reapproaches, basically what happened is, because Loki was seen as being disagreeable, Mobius basically tortured him by putting him in a time loop where it was a memory time loop where he had pranked Lady Sif by cutting her hair in her sleep, and she kneed him in the groin repeatedly. So it's just this time loop where Sif shows up holding the hair, she beats up Loki, knees him in the crotch, leaves. Then 5 minutes later, If shows back up, and it repeats. And Mobius comes and frees Loki, but just as that point, they're confronted by Ravonna Renslayer, and she kills Mobius apparently, and brings Loki and Sylvie before the Timekeepers. However, just at that point, B-15 intervenes and throws a sword in, and the Lokis are now free, and they fight off their guards. It looks like they've knocked out Ravonna, and then Sylvie throws the blade at one of the Timekeepers and decapitates it, revealing it to just be an android. At which point Ravonna reawakens and seemingly kills Loki. I'll get to that seemingly part in just a minute. But Sylvie, because this was right when Loki was about to confess his feelings to Sylvie, because that was the other thing, it seems that that Loki seems to have fallen for Sylvie. I don't know so much if it's reciprocal, but that's what's creating this Nexus event. And so Sylvie manages to fight back and subdue Ravonna again, and then says, I want to know everything this time, and you're going to explain it. And that's when the credits start to roll, and then in the mid-credits scene, we see Loki is in fact not dead. He wakes up in a post-apocalyptic New York City, and he's confronted by 3 other versions of himself. We have Richard E. Grant, the iconic Richard E. Grant, appearing as Loki in his more traditional comic attire, the more garishly bright yellow with the big horns. We have the child Loki, and we have I'm just gonna say African Loki. Hopefully not get into too much trouble there. And so it's like they're like, you need to come with us right now. So it appears that maybe the agents who were killed off were in fact not killed off. I mean, it did seem kind of strange they killed Morbius off as quickly as they did. So, I'm guessing he's probably still alive somewhere. And sorry, my phone went off. Where was I? Yeah, and seeing where this is going to go now, definitely going into an intriguing fashion. I am sort of confused. I've seen a lot of people talking about Kang the Conqueror possibly appearing in this, which, given the nature of that villain, makes a lot of sense. I know that he reportedly popped up in the background of the pilot episode, but I didn't see it. I guess I was having too many problems with the audio. There was one other thing from the comics, too, that showed up, and I thought that was intriguing, but I can't quite place my finger on it. Again, maybe that was the child Loki again, because that happened in the comics, too, where Loki got stranded, basically had to be reborn as a child, and we get kind of parallel Lokis running around at the same time as well. So all that's kind of from the comics, too. And like I said, I'm intrigued as to where this is going, so yeah, we'll tune back in for episode 5 here soon. Alright, episode 5 of Loki is titled Journey into Mystery, which is of course nice because that's a reference to the comic all the Thor characters first appeared in, the anthology comic, that is. And we get another nice comic reference, which I'll mention a bit later, but basically Ravonna Renslayer explains to Sylvie that when the TVA prunes someone, they don't actually kill them. They basically transport them to this point in the timeline that appears to be the end, where there's just this, everything comes and it stops, and then there's this big empty void. And this kind of gets Sylvie thinking about something, and, wondering, well, you dump all of these time variants there, but, how do you know they're really gone, or, if anything really goes away? And, that's what happened with all these Lokis. Lokis are the only survivors in there because everything else gets attacked by this giant cloud monster called Elias. And the Lokis are the only, because Lokis are, tricksters who know how to survive. Although one of the Lokis calls themselves the god of outcasts instead of god of mischief. And from that, we get, we meet the various Lokis. We get, obviously there's Child Loki, there's African Loki, I don't know if he was ever named, and then there's Future Loki, who, basically he's the variant who, and they all kind of give their explanations as to what made them variants. Future Loki, that's the old Loki with the Richard E. Grant one. He is from, basically he used a holo projection to fake his death, and he went to this planet where he managed to he sort of removed himself from the timeline on this planet, but then when he got bored, he re-entered it, and that's when the TVA arrested him. And then there's Child Loki, who somehow managed to kill Thor at some point. And then there's African Loki. I'm just calling him African Loki. Again, I didn't catch his name at all. But he claims that he got all the Infinity Stones when he wasn't supposed to. Yeah, they don't really believe that that's the case, but... And then there's Gator Loki. A Loki who is an alligator who is a variant because he ate a roadkill cat. Okay, and this actually leads to the other kind of big comic reference in here is they're panning through, we see damaged Mjolnir, they're panning down to this subterranean base with the damaged, with the Lokis have been living out of to avoid Elias. And they're panning through there, and you see a jar with a frog that has the winged Thor helmet on it. That is also a reference. There was a comic about a frog of thunder. I can't remember if it's Thor got turned into a frog or not, but yeah, that's actually one of the big Thor comics from the 80s. And also, turns out there are a whole bunch of other Lokis running around, but none of them can be trusted because they all betray each other. And then there's a Loki who ran for president who claims he's in charge, but all the Lokis just claim they're in charge, and then they all betray each other and start attacking. So, And it's kind of at this point that Sylvie arrives. She basically pruned herself, but before swiping Renslayer's portal generator. And she brings herself there and she encounters Elias and she makes a bit of contact with it. And just before Mobius arrives in a car to pick her up and take her to where he thinks the other Lokis are, and she convinces them, no, we actually need to go back and encounter that cloud monster. Because what she's learned is that Elias is not like the Guardian at the end of time or anything, or something to destroy time. It's just a guard dog. It's protecting something. And basically, if you need to bring down the TVA, you need to get to whatever is living here at this point. Because apparently there is actually something beyond the end of times. And it's the thing that created the Timekeepers. And so Loki and, they all reunite. Sophie gives Mobius the portal generator to go back. The other Lokis decide just to kind of stay. The child Loki elects to go home, but old Loki decides to help run a distraction for Elias so that Sophie's the name of the actress. Sylvie can enchant him, and Loki discovers that if they work together, they can kind of both enchant him, and that works. And that opens the clouds to the Citadel, and that's kind of how the episode ends. No mid-credit or end-credit stinger. So, yeah. Like, I did like a little bit of this episode, but this thing kind of is weird. Yeah. I know that's a strange thing to say about this show, but this I think it got a little too weird. Like, we end on Renslayer saying she's going to explain everything, and she explains a little bit, but not enough. And then, she calls in the TVA, and, even later, B-17 points out that when being interrogated, like, Sylvie actually wants revenge. She wants to figure out, you say you want to figure this out, but she really wants to figure this out. She's driven by something. So she could actually do it where you can't. And so I think that's leading to something where Renslayer starts researching the beginning of time to see if there's any clues there as to how the Timekeepers were formed. Because remember last week the Timekeepers were androids. And that didn't, I don't think they developed that enough. That just felt really clunky and a little out of place. And then everything really should have been taken on, the end of timeline, or the end of the timeline there. So it did feel like, and even then, that felt oddly padded out. Like, this maybe should have been a 45-minute episode, not a 50-minute one. It kind of petered out towards the end a little bit, too. So hopefully this means we're going to be wrapping things up soon. I don't know how long this is supposed to go. I mean, because this honestly felt like, a penultimate episode. So hopefully, I don't know how much longer, but again, hopefully they'll do some better explaining this in the next one. See you then. Okay, the finale to Loki Season 1 is For All Time, Always, and it picks up right where the 5th episode left off. Loki and Sylvie, Sophie's the actress, obviously. Sylvie are walking into this castle. They're debating as to whether or not to just knock on the door to kick it down. The doors open up, and they're greeted by Ms. Minutes, who says that she represents he who remains at the end of time. He who remains, basically. And, this guy at the end has an offer. He says, look, we will put you in a timeline where Loki rules beats the Avengers, kills Thanos, and takes over the universe. And Sylvie is right there at his side. She got a normal life, and you two get to be together forever, and you'll be happy. We'll just kind of wedge you into the timeline somehow. And they both turn it down. They'd rather talk to this person, and this individual steps out. It's he who remains, but for all intents and purposes, this is the well-known Avengers villain, Kang the Conqueror, or Immortus, or Nathaniel Richards, or Ramatut. Yes, Kang is a deeply intertwined character. There's a whole bunch of videos getting into him. I'll get into his motivations in the show, but, again, he's a villain who uses time travel a lot, and he's popped up in various incarnations in various forms. He's never, like I said, he's never really had a truly great story attached to him. Probably the best Kang story is Avengers Forever, and even then, that's not a book I would necessarily recommend to new readers because it is deeply, deeply continuity laden, and you have to really know your Marvel Universe. So yeah, this is where it's going into a very unique direction. But basically, Kang reveals to them that, hey, I've known about you the whole time. I know you are coming because I've been plotting this. I have scripted this. You two were destined to find me and come here because you are going to replace me. You either kill me and this timeline falls apart, or you replace me and you rule over the timeline because I'm getting old and tired and I really need to move on. And basically his whole backstory is there was a researcher in the 31st century in one timeline who discovered all these other timelines of himself in the 31st century, and they all began working together to try to improve things across everything. Except there were some who were bad eggs, and suddenly a war broke out between all the timelines, and finally one of them just snapped and said, nope, we're destroying everything, we're going to merge it all into one timeline. So, in other words, Kang is the Council of Ricks. There we go. Okay. And like I said, he basically says, you have a choice. You either kill me and this whole falls apart, and at that point, guess what? There's going to be more of me, and we're going to go to war again, and we're going to be back into this trouble. Or we're going to, or you two take over, you keep order and maintain the timeline, you run the TVA, and that's how that works. And we briefly go back to the TVA a couple of times. We have Mobius dealing with Renslayer, basically revealing that they plotted her, for lack of a better term, variant status to get her into the position, because at one point she gave Mobius a pen to sign a document he couldn't help but notice was from this high school that the real Ravina Renslayer was a principal in. And so what they do is they basically he and Guard B-17 set up the storyline, the situation where Renslayer becomes a variant, so she has to join the TVA to you get the idea. It creates the timeline. But Renslayer kind of fights back when Mobius tries to prune her. She steals it, she stops him, she doesn't kill him though, and she opens a portal and just leaves, saying she's got to protect the mission. What that mission is, I don't know, because it's never mentioned again, and that's probably one of the few drawbacks to this episode. Again, I guess that helps plant seeds for Season 2, though. However, back at the end of the universe, basically, where Kang is sitting there, Sophie, again, decides, nope, I'm going to try to kill Kang, and Loki stops her. It says Sophie. Sylvie. God, it did it twice now. Sylvie tries to kill Kang, and Loki stops her and says, look, you know us. We're we're both kind of the Lord of Lies. I lie all the time. I think he's telling the truth here, because he really is not in a position to lie. And this could cause chaos and could really do way more damage than good. And she says, but we're stuck. I don't want to live the same life over and over again. I don't want to be here at the end of the universe. That's not entertaining. That's not interesting to me. I want to live a proper life. And they're fighting, and she gets close, and Loki stops her one last time. He confesses his feelings to her. She acknowledges it. They kiss, and then she opens a portal back to the TVA and shoves him through it. And I'll get to my theory on what happens next when that happens. Afterwards, she then stabs Kang and kills him. The timeline begins falling apart. It's branching. We see Mobius and security guard B-17 watch all the timelines start to prune off a branchway as it falls apart. Loki comes rushing to them, but they don't recognize him, and he looks up and he sees where once the timekeepers were carved into the visage of the wall, instead Kang the Conqueror is. And he's realized that, oh, Kang was right, this is all going to fall apart soon. And that's how the episode ends, and then the mid-credit scene is basically just a file getting stamped, Loki Season 2 coming soon. So, yeah, that explains that bit. Anyway, so yeah, like this, I think did a good job. Like I said, it's planted seeds for Season 2. If I do have some problems, again, it got a little clunky. This was basically an episode that was 3/4 exposition. It took a long time for stuff to actually happen in it, but Once it does, it is leading to an interesting place, and I would like to see where it goes. I don't know how much the MCU is going to be able to fall into this, because obviously we have Ant-Man and the Wasp, because Kang is supposed to show up in that, or Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Kang is supposed to show up in that. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is supposed to play into it. The next Spider-Man film is supposedly supposed to play into it. So yeah, we don't know. Could they maybe pick and choose from, say, the X-Men films, or this Venom film, because that made money even though it wasn't very good. Are they going to start working that in to make that all part of the same universe or not? But yeah, anyway, my theory as to what happened with Loki, I think when Sylvie pushed him through the portal, she did not push him to the normal time. I think she pushed him into an alternate universe, because that was when the timeline was already starting to splinter at that point. So that was my idea. That's my idea. That's why Mobius and the Guard don't recognize it, because he's in a parallel TVA. That's just my little theory. So yeah, like I said, overall, I think I gave it a B. I think it was not quite perfect enough, but I think it did a good job of handling a very complicated premise. The performances were strong, but again, the sound issues early on, and it was really. There were times where there was kind of a, hey, let's get to the point. You're trying to pad the time out a little too much here. So yeah, those are my thoughts as to why I gave it a B.
New Superhero Mashers Micro! 1, 2, 3, 4! New Micro Mashers are here, and under Shrink Ray attack, but Hulk and Spidey mash up with a plan to help Cap. Cap puts the pedal to the metal, and his shield knocks Ultron out. That's what it's all about. Ha-ha! New Micro Mashers mix and mash with one another. Vehicles too. Part of the Marvel Superhero Mashers collection. Figures and vehicles each sold separately.
Okay, so busy week got even busier. I had to run out and buy a new SD card to start using, because my old one, the computer wouldn't read it anymore. Like, I would have to pop it in and out of the slot like 3 or 4 times to get it to be recognized. I mean, I think the last time it took 10, and it finally just snapped, and I did all of the technical stuff to scan it and see if there was anything wrong with it. They couldn't find it. And I finally just said, if you need, if I one just said, just get a new SD card. More often than not, that's what's the problem. So yeah, this one seems to work, hopefully. It worked the first time I popped it in, even though there wasn't necessarily anything on it. So hopefully I can get this up soon. I am intending to get this up on Thursday. So after that, we're going to get the Fear Street 1666 review, then the random trade review on Hercules Full Circle, and then Money in the Bank on Monday. So yeah, and then after that, I think it'll be Mighty Ones Season 2, probably next Friday or Saturday. I don't entirely know for sure. And then after that, it's Jungle Cruise, and then the next random trade review. See you all next time. Hey guys, remember, you can help support my channel at patreon.com/SleepyTimeForCat Productions, where you can help request a movie, even if it's something like, say, Sonic the Hedgehog or the next Purge film. I'll review it.